Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really sensitive topic, but an incredibly important one, understanding sexual harm. We're going to explore it through a pretty unique lens, looking at insights from Jewish law, halakha, and wider communal viewpoints. Our focus for this particular deep dive is a book called Your Border is Peace. It's, well, quite profound. It addresses sexual harm from a halakhic perspective, which honestly is an area that maybe hasn't always gotten the deep scholarly dive it deserves. So our mission today is to really unpack some key sections, specifically pages 60 to 63, which look closely at, well, risk factors and, crucially, prevention strategies.
Exactly. Pages 60 through 63, they really get into some very sensitive territory, offering a nuanced view of how vulnerabilities can, unfortunately, open the door to harm. But, just as importantly, looking at what we can actually do to create safer spaces, spaces grounded in our values. It's not just about looking back at what happened, but really understanding why it matters so much and, how we can use this knowledge moving forward.
Right. Let's start with something the book highlights right at the beginning, which I found really powerful. It's how severe sexual harm is viewed, even when compared to something as devastating as murder. The book makes it clear the Torah sees this not just as, a physical violation. It's a deep wound to the soul, to a person's very essence, because fundamentally we're created in the image of God. That perspective just sets the stage, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And what's really striking is the clarification that this isn't just about the most extreme cases like, say, rape. The text emphasizes that even what might seem like lighter forms of harm harassment, indecent acts, maybe even non-physical but deeply offensive behavior, these can leave scars just as deep, sometimes even deeper psychologically.
Deeper? How so?
Well, the source brings up a really interesting nuance here. It suggests that when the harm is ambiguous, maybe it's subtle harassment versus clear abuse, the psychological fallout can actually be worse.
Worse. Why would that be?
Because the victim, they struggle. They struggle to clearly label the act as evil, or the perpetrator is definitively wicked. This ambiguity creates this huge emotional tangle, guilt, shame, confusion. It makes reaching out for help incredibly difficult.
That makes sense. That internal conflict must be immense. And it underlines the long-term impact, right? On emotional well-being, mental health, social functioning. The trauma isn't always immediate. It can bubble up years later. So early identification, early intervention, they're just critical for healing.
Which brings us right to the core of pages 60-63, these risk factors.
Yes. The book talks about something it calls a spirit of folly, sort of a naivete or recklessness that can lead people into dangerous situations, especially around sexuality when there's a lack of solid, proper education.
A spirit of folly. Interesting phrase. So where does the book say this or other vulnerabilities tend to lead to harm? What are the main scenarios? Okay, so the first major scenario discussed centers on natural curiosity, particularly during adolescence, right? When this completely normal curiosity about sexuality isn't met with open, honest, accurate discussion, maybe at home, maybe in school, kids get pushed to find answers on their own.
Okay, and where do they typically look? This is where pages 60-63 get quite specific, I recall.
Very specific. The text points directly to problematic sources, mainly in the digital world. Think internet pornography, which gives such a distorted picture of intimacy. Or maybe films and TV shows that are superficial or even challenging, presenting relationships in ways that are far removed from ideas of holiness or deep connection.
Yeah, or even social media, right? YouTube chats, videos.
Exactly, offering bits of information that are often incomplete, incorrect, or sometimes, frankly, dangerous. It paints a picture of a real Wild West of information.
And the consequences of diving into that unchecked.
They're severe. The book talks about deep psychological damage from consuming this kind of content, often in secret, which adds another layer of harm. There's also the violation of halakhic principles, guarding one's eyes, modesty, and critically, the internalization of really warped views about sexuality, about bodies, about how people should relate to each other. These views can then stick with a person.
Wow, that's heavy.
It is. And the source actually brings in wisdom from the Rambam, Maimonides, from his 8 chapters. He talks about the immense power of imagination, of the images we take in on shaping our character. So without the right preparation, the right guidance, being exposed to this stuff can fundamentally skew how someone perceives relationships, especially between men and women, moving them far away from the kind of holiness and purity Judaism envisions for, say, the marital bond.
Okay, so that's one major pathway, the lack of good information leading to harmful sources. What's the second primary scenario the book outlines?
The second one shifts focus. It talks about the exploitation of innocence, that lack of knowledge, by abusers who are often quite skilled manipulator. And this can happen even within close circles, like families, which is particularly insidious.
How does that manipulation work, according to the text?
Well, the book describes how these abusers might use emotional sophistication. For example, framing an inappropriate touch not as abuse, but as empathy, or as a way of understanding the victim's emotional pain or distress.
Oh, that's chilling. Using vulnerability against someone.
Precisely. It creates this manipulative cycle. It can repeat, subtly escalating over time towards more intimate and damaging contact, all because the abuser is twisting that natural trust.
Which brings us to another really disturbing but vital point raised in these pages, the phrase castle victims becoming perpetrators.
Yes, the book addresses this directly, citing research findings. It shows that young people who experience sexual harm or other significant traumas are actually at a much higher risk of becoming abusers themselves later on.
Why is that? What's the underlying mechanism?
The trauma itself, it fundamentally damages their sense of safety, their trust in others, in the world. And this can, tragically, lead to them replicating the harm they suffered. It's complex, but think about the deep emotional pain, the shame, the rejection. Sometimes seeking control or release or even some kind of twisted compensation can manifest as harming others. Often the book notes, without even fully grasping the devastation they're causing, it mentions that a significant portion of abusers carry their own deep scars from past abuse.
That cycle is just devastating to contemplate. So, given all this, the risks, the potential for cycles of harm, what does this mean for prevention? What's the takeaway?
The book is crystal clear on this point. Early therapeutic intervention is absolutely decisive. It's crucial in stopping these harmful patterns before they become deeply ingrained. The success rates, it emphasizes, are significantly higher with early help compared to trying to intervene much later.
So therapy is key for those already harmed, but what about preventing the harm in the first place?
Right, and that leads directly to the book's powerful call for prevention through education.
Comprehensive education. It argues strongly for a precise educational framework, one that's rooted in Jewish sources, but also, crucially, acknowledges and addresses modern realities head-on. No burying our heads in the sand.
Okay, so if we're talking comprehensive education, what does that actually look like? What should it include?
It needs to cover several bases. Reliable information about physical development, for sure. Understanding the nature of human desire, attraction. These are normal parts of life. Discussing the sanctity of marital relationships within a Jewish context, and, very importantly, providing practical tools. How to cope with temptations, how to navigate challenges that inevitably come up.
So the core message is really knowledge over ignorance.
Absolutely. True prevention comes from understanding, not from trying to hide things away or pretend they don't exist. The book gives a great example. Clear knowledge empowers a potential victim. It helps them identify when something is wrong, helps them find the words, gives them the confidence to speak out.
Whereas ignorance can lead them to misinterpret harm. Maybe they think it's normal affection, or they're too scared they won't be believed if they do say something. That clarity that comes from knowledge is just vital.
Vital for breaking the silence. The book also touches on adolescent identity, doesn't it? Including complex feelings, like same-sex attraction.
Yes, it does address that sensitive area. It stresses the importance of clarifying that exploring feelings, including attractions toward the same sex during adolescence, can be a natural part of development. It frames this energy as having positive potential that can find its expression and meaning within the context of marriage, according to the traditional view presented. It also specifically notes that such feelings in adolescence don't necessarily lock in a final sexual identity. And it points out that halakhic rules, for instance, around intimate relationships between women, need to be discussed clearly, not ignored.
And delivering these messages,
That's
it
right.
has to be done carefully, right?
Oh, absolutely. Sensitively, clearly, unambiguously. No mixed signals. And the education has to be tailored. Age-appropriate, gender-sensitive, considerate of individual personalities and backgrounds. One size definitely does not fit all here.
Okay, so knowledge is power. What about practical skills?
Crucial. This education must teach tangible skills. The ability to say no firmly and clearly, how to recognize and avoid potentially suspicious or dangerous situations, and, critically, knowing exactly when and who to turn to for help. Who are the safe adults? What are the resources?
And underlying all of this education, what's the ultimate message we need to convey?
The absolute unwavering message must be, There is no shame in sharing something troubling that happened. None. And the responsibility, the fault for any harm, always lies with the abuser. Always. Never, ever the victim.
We have to believe them. We have to stand by them.
Without question. That trust is foundational.
Wow. We've really covered a lot from just those few pages, 60 to 63, of Your Border is Peace. It shows how deeply our tradition, when engaged thoughtfully, really grapples with protecting people, especially the vulnerable. We've seen how ignorance isn't bliss. It can actually be a risk factor. And on the flip side, how knowledge, combined with compassion and open communication, those are our most powerful tools for prevention.
Yeah, and if you zoom out, connected to the bigger picture, it just highlights how incredibly important it is to actively cultivate environments of safety. Environments built on trust, built on clear communication, in our families, in our schools, in our communities. The whole fabric of society really relies on it.
The book isn't just diagnosing a problem, it's really issuing a call to action, isn't it? To actively work to ensure the safety of our kids, our community members. It's like building a strong inner fortress for people, built with knowledge and reinforced by unwavering support.
Exactly. So thinking about all this, what does it mean for you listening right now?
Yeah, maybe consider how these core principles, things like clear communication, proactive education that's age appropriate, and that solid, unwavering support for anyone needing help. How can these be put into practice in your own life, in your family, in your community? What role could you play in fostering those kinds of safe spaces for open discussion, for real understanding?
Rooted in these ideas, how can we collectively work to prevent future harm and just build a more secure future for everyone?
Something to really think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this conversation has offered some valuable insights and maybe sparked some further reflection.